vote on them. I don't think the vote will be, you can still abstain if you want to, John. I don't know that our vote will be binding, but unless Louis joins us again, it's going to be what it is. So, any thoughts on the meeting minutes, either grammatical or substantive perspective?
I didn't see any issues and they seemed on target to me.
Go fine.
Okay, do we want to bother with the motion or go ahead?
There was, just something I want to follow up with, not necessarily there's a problem with the minutes, but that was 3D, the discussion of number 3, appointing authority of board of parks and cemeteries, water commissioners, et cetera. Because that's, I sort of need an answer to those questions to be able to put them in my summary. Because I have that question.
I have sent out emails to the commissioners and the superintendents of each of those boards. I have not did that yesterday when I was doing the minutes, so I have not heard
That's
back.
okay, no problem. All right, I move that we accept the minutes.
Second or discussion, John, do you can second the motion.
I'll second the, sure. Second to it.
John, I think you should abstain, actually.
I will abstain.
And
You can second it.
he can second the motion, but he can abstain from the vote.
So voted 201.
So I think, yeah, 2-0. And I'm gonna leave it for that. And if someone has a question whether that's sufficient for approving the minutes, which they may, we'll deal with that then.
Well, we won't be able to approve minutes if Libby is truly
That's-
gone.
That's correct, so it is what it is,
Yeah.
that's all we can do.
Unapproved minutes.
I'm sorry.
Libby, so Libby,
Very well. Sorry to hear
yeah,
that.
so, I don't know what the health issues are, but she is recently cited health concerns, so
I'll send her an email.
she thinks she's gonna be resigning. I don't know if she's formally forwarded her resignation to the selectmen yet.
She told
Because
me
she
that
also-
she had.
She had.
She had sent a letter of resignation to the former.
So I thought that was my understanding, but then she also said that she might be attending tonight, so I couldn't reconcile those two things. Unless she was coming to help us with votes on the minutes, but as far as I know, she's resigned. You weren't at the last meeting, but I think you already know that Dave Reed resigned.
Yeah, she mentioned that in
So, then there were 30.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I don't know if the whole board of selectmen knows about the situation yet. Just found out Thursday night last week that Libby was resigning. I had mentioned to Mark, the chair, that Dave Reed had resigned. I mentioned that to him the night of town meeting. So I'll be in contact with Mark again, the whole board, to figure out what the board wants to do next, to see if they want to appoint 2 more people. You should also know, so I'm trying to get a handle on whether or not this committee sunsets on June 30th, 2019, if there's a sunset date. Just because I know the Board of Selectmen every year has a list of appointees that they go through to make sure that there's no vacancies in any particular boards. So this appointment for this board can be part of that process, if that's what the selectmen choose to do.
Yeah. Our appointment document said September.
I think, so, my understanding, when I originally asked Beth Willis, the town clerk, for a copy of the Board of Selectmen's vote by which they voted to organize this committee, my understanding was, I don't recall seeing any sunset date on that vote. I'm trying to picture it in my mind. But then I saw on our website that we were supposed to be sunsetted on June 30th. I don't think it's a big deal for the selectmen to extend our committee if that's what they want to do, but we just need to make sure they understand the situation, and if they are to extend it, that we need 2 more bodies. We should have 2 more bodies, if for nothing else, to make sure we can have a quorum and meet and discuss things. So,
I'm sure you saw this, that's why I got that September date.
the 1-year term expiring September 18, 2019. So, I'm glad you brought that. I did not recall that. I actually
That was the appointment letter.
That's the
I think.
appointment letter. When I got a copy of the vote didn't have any date in it, so I was going by just the vote and not the letter.
I don't know, that's helpful, just
In
like a paper.
any
with
event,
the-
I've asked Kelly, the town administrator, to find out what the sunset date is for us, and if she gives us an answer, I think that's what we go with. And we let the board of selectmen know what the situation is. So, that June 30th date will be coming along pretty quickly. So I didn't plan on doing anything formally as a whole committee, signing any letter. I just assumed I would talk with the selectman, the chair, or send them a letter
Mhm.
from myself.
Mhm.
And ask them to appoint the people if they'd like us to continue. So, you mad at that pen?
Yeah, actually,
Take out your frustration, I'm kidding.
comes and goes.
Dick, if you have any insight as to the process for that, is it just as informal as I just discussed? For me to let the selectmen know. I think it should be in writing, a quick brief letter in writing, just so there's something for the board to look at.
Right.
But if there's anything other, go ahead.
Could I just ask about the June 30th? How does that fit? Again, always reading what town meeting said and what we're doing. It's the 10-month period, is that how the 30th comes in
Well,
right on?
so when you say a 10-month period, I'm not sure that we typically ever had a 10-month period per the board of selectmen vote. If you recall that, that wasn't in the.
I don't specifically remember the details of what we did, but order of magnitude, whether we said it or not, is kind of anew to what town meeting said. That doesn't mean that the selectmen can't take executive privilege and extend it or whatever. I was just trying to figure out where the 30th came. It seemed to me you started sometime in September.
We started in
did.
September, and I was assuming that we had potentially a sunset date of June 30th based on something I've seen a while ago on the website. That's the only place where that came from. So
Okay.
if the board of selectmen initially voted 10 months or 1 year or no date at all, then we don't have to worry about it necessarily. And I've asked Kelly to find out what the sunset date actually was, but because you're in this process now, I thought it made sense to add us to that list of appointees.
Oh, yes, definitely. I would say to do that. Yes, of course.
So
And that'll help determine whether it gets extended or not.
whether it gets extended.
Right on, right on.
Right.
But it is a challenge to the Board of Selectmen, whether we said it or not, what we were told to do based on town meeting. And it seems to me in town meeting that there was it was said to report within 10 months or something of that nature.
I
But
don't-
we'll check on that. That's
I
not
don't
your
recall
problem.
the actual town meeting vote, honestly, off the top of my head. I just remember that the article was tabled, and I don't know if it would rose the level of a directive to the board of selectmen, I don't recall that. I'm trying to recall, I just don't. And, but I think it was essentially the discussion at town meeting, my recollection was the matter would be tabled and we would look into it further, and whether or not that meant there was a hard deadline set on it or not, I don't recall. Boyd might be the one who recalls, since it was his warrant article.
Let me check it for you while you're going.
Sure. So anyway, that's where we are in the context of the committee membership.
Well, I think whether extended past June or not past June, I think one of the things we need to really push to get done is this summary thing we've been talking about. get that done, have it as a package.
Yeah, we could definitely do that. I don't know that it's honestly feasible to get it done by the end of June. We have 2 more meetings. You think we can get that done and all the discussions that go into the summaries by the end of June? I don't know about you guys, but I have, this is my close of fiscal year. Busiest time at work, so, I personally don't think I have the ability to get this done by the end of June. So if the board is like, if that is, I'm not saying that is the sunset date, I have no recollection of it, of that being correct. But if it is, then, I don't know if we can get the summary done. And, but that might be, the board may say, you know, there's the whole range of possibilities are open. We serve at the pleasure of the board of selectmen, so they can say they don't extend, and they may not want a summary that's incomplete without a report, as far as I know. I have no idea.
Yeah.
So we could push to get the summary done, but if the deadline is June 30th and we're not extended, they may not want anything. They'd rather have a whole report. I don't know, that's gonna be their decision, so.
This is the warrant as written, it's not the vote. But I think it was, the vote was just a positive action without any changes for everybody.
You have masking
We
tape over your
sent it,
camera
but
too.
I think what Lou's
I
talking,
do too.
what Lou's
I know,
talking about is us, as a group, having a
I
chance
don't know
to
how they make
discuss
it through the
them.
masking tape, but they do.
So
And
this-
I think
Do
Lily
they?
finished, I
No,
do think Lily finished hers.
that's the warrant.
I laugh, that's exactly what mine is.
So I'd have to get the annual report or Beth to give us an
Yeah.
actual copy of the vote to figure that out.
I think it was simply positive action.
It's positive action?
Correction.
Okay.
I think so.
So that would have been 10 months from town meeting?
From when it convened, no, from when the committee was convened, meaning September.
Convening the committee. It says,
So 10 months,
10 months.
10 months from October 1.
That's not your charge, that's the Board of Selectmen's charge.
Right.
Now, what we passed on to you, I have to review, but
Right.
that's our problem.
Yeah, that's good.
It's what the people told us to do.
Well, Lou, I mean, if, we can probably complete some, I don't know, complete's not the right word.
We could
We,
keep
we,
board
we,
report as,
we can have some information by the end of June, but it will not have our thoughtful assessment, right? It won't have.
it won't be completed.
It won't be
in the sense- It won't be a complete report.
And so how
We may
much
not even
longer,
vote on it.
so how much longer do you think we need to give them something?
Well,
That's complete.
the fact that if this 10-month window is correct, 10 months from October would put us at the end of August. I think we would need at least that. I think we might want even, we're gonna need 2 more people to get up to speed.
I don't think that's gonna help us.
We still don't know, even if when we get the
Well,
summary done, we
yes.
don't know what our next steps are.
Potentially.
We haven't decided
Well,
what our steps are.
looking at, I mean, we're not the first group that have tackled this problem, and other
Correct.
groups took 18 months to 2 years.
Correct.
So thinking we would come up with something in 10 months and it'd be
Yes.
thoughtful and thorough
Well,
is,
right, but that's not our issue as much as the
No, no.
board's issue, and the board could certainly say something like to that effect.
yeah. But my thought is, if we thought we need, if we were looking to give an assessment of how much more time we would need, I think an additional 10 months might be might be a minimum that we would need. Because we have this, but like you said, we haven't decided, are we, you know, what are our next steps? And we have this summary that we have this document you sent us about another town, Cohasset's, Cohasset's charter. That sort of gives us an idea of maybe where we, a framework of where we could go next, but I think we've talked about this a couple of times, there's more people, whether they're people in town or people in other towns that we still have to talk to, and we know from doing this, talking to people takes a long time.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's like anything else, right? I mean, it's the, the classic what's the scope, you know, how much are you gonna do? What's the time duration, and how many resources are you gonna put on it?
Mhm.
If any two of those are fixed, the third has to be flexible,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so what's important to the board what's important to the board, the scope, in which case we need more time, or is what's important, meeting a deadline, in which case, okay, this scope is gonna be
Mhm.
thin.
Right. Right. Well, my whole thought process in doing this from the get-go was to have data to rely on and for a report, and not just a opinion
A lot of
saying,
anecdotes.
we want to have, you know, we think Topsfield's town government should be X, Y, and Z.
Right.
So I still don't know, believe that for whatever this is worth, this is what we have for facts so far. And even if we talk with the Mass Municipal Association and other communities, I just don't think this is, you know, I don't wanna abandon this necessarily, I wanna get this right and then figure out where to go from there.
Oh, yeah, we've already put time into this. And other people have given us their time, so we need to get this right and incorporate it into whatever
Right.
final format we end up with.
And so what do you think? Do you think we can have, knowing, and we can talk about more what it means to summarize this. What do you, either of you feel as if we can get this done in June? 2 more meetings. So basically, if we go, I don't know how prepared we are tonight to talk about particular questions. You've done some work, I've done some, not as much as you, Roberta. I don't know what you've done, John.
I did what was assigned to me, I think.
So we could talk about those tonight and then reassess. Part of me would like to have a full board to really flesh out what these responses mean. If we're gonna be voting as a full board as to what they mean, but
Yeah,
that
I think-
might not be a reality.
I think the only thing we can do in this time, you know, between now and the end of June, the only thing we can do is summarize the response to the questionnaire.
Mhm.
I don't think there's anything more that we can do.
And get it into a consistent format maybe
Yeah.
even.
That's it, I agree. Not much more than that.
You don't think the summaries themselves require input from 2 other members of the committee? Like, just to get them, maybe not because they weren't involved in this, but.
I think if you were gonna depend on 2 new people coming in, they would have to study, since they never went and talked to people about this and got the feeling for what people were saying, then they would have to, I mean, really digest these answers and go over them with a fine-tooth comb. And I don't think, the answers as we put them down were never intended to be a full picture of what the interviews were, do you know what I mean? I think
Agree.
having gone through it, you have a sense of it.
I agree, they were directional, they were
Yeah,
intended to
Yeah,
generate a conversation and
Yeah.
to, and, yeah, so I agree with you. You know, it's not like the answer lies therein and all we need to do is, you know, study it enough and we'll see it. you know.
So let's shoot then to try to get our summaries done by the end of June. My understanding from you is that Libby has already done her materials and submitted them, or will be submitting them.
I believe she's done her summaries, and she was going to leave everything with,
Debbie,
Debbie.
maybe by then, maybe by the next meeting, which is the 28th, so that'll put us the 11th, I believe. 11th for our next meeting.
Yeah.
Government
Aye.
Review Committee,
Oh, okay. Where would be the zoning hearing?
Is zoning in the big, in the,
And the selectmen.
If you go back
Okay,
down
that's
this
fine.
hallway, all the way to the end, and take a right, and it's all the way in the end of that hallway.
downstairs, front of the building.
it's on this board.
Oh, is that this floor?
The selectmen's rooms is where they have it.
I think it's a ZBA.
It's on this,
Yeah, but that's, they use the room at the front of the building, right?
Right.
They call it the selectmen.
they call it the selectmen's.
So we could meet on June 11th. We could meet on June 25th.
That last week in June, I'm not in the country.
Not in the country, I hope you're going somewhere nice and fun.
I am. 3 generations of us are going to Italy and Germany, to revisit where we lived for 6 years.
That's awesome.
And the next 2 generations are dragging along Bob and I because we remember where they lived and they don't really.
All right, so we might, depending on how you feel about this, be able to meet 2 weeks in a row, either the 4th and the 11th, or the 11th and the 18th.
I will not be here on the 18th.
Okay.
I
Any
leave on the
nights
12th.
other than
So I leave on the 12th, which is why you
You're
said
good
the 11th,
select.
like, okay, I can be here, then I'll pack when I get home. So I'm gone from the 12th to the 19th, come back on the 19th.
Where are you
So
going?
what-
Somewhere fun? I hope.
I visit my son in Seattle.
Oh,
Oh,
nice.
that's nice. So what dates were you saying?
I had said, what about the 4th and the 11th then?
I can do the 4th and the 11th.
Because it looks like the 18th, the 17th, 18th, 24th, and 25th are out. So the 4th and the 11th for tentative meeting dates.
June 4th is a week from tonight.
Yeah.
And the 11th is a week after that. And
We can help.
and the week after that, you're away, and then the week after that, I'm away.
So let's talk on the 4th about subsequent meetings. I hope to know by then, maybe know what the Board of Selectmen is thinking about.
And what time on the 4th do you want to do?
I would prefer the 7 PM meeting time.
Yeah.
Just any thoughts, both of you?
That's fine, 7's fine with me.
Dick, do you know off the top of your head when the Selectmen meet?
When the next one is, I'm just checking that.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's the 3rd, but I'm just checking that.
I'll try to get a letter to Kelly tomorrow and see if we can get on an agenda, if the board so is ready for us, and that's what you guys wanna do.
Do we maybe want to bring John up to speed on the format?
Yeah, I think that's good for us to talk about next. So, what we were talking about last week, and then just Roberta and I earlier today, was what our vision is for our report and the summary of these responses. So, generally, we were thinking that we would have a high-level executive summary of everything with our recommendations. And then for each question, we would do a summary for each question. So we'd have, in the body of the report, we would repeat the question, and then we would have a summary in plain English, basically in our own words, what we think the responses to that particular question are. And then, after that, and within the bed of that, we might pick a few responses, like the overwhelming majority said X, and then put in parentheses like the number of votes of that said that. And just before I forget, I'd like to say, I think we could probably, I know we talked about the housing authority before, and keeping it in there for, because we did interview with them, and there were a lot of non-answers. There might be some benefit to not including their information. We can have 20 sets of responses. It's a nice round number, easy to do percentages.
You didn't have 10 and 10 to
10
10
and
elected
10.
and 10
Right.
appointed.
It just fits nicely. We could also include it in the, attach all of the actual responses in an appendix to the report, and include it, just say we didn't use that information in preparing the report, that's all. So, but as far as the actual body of the report goes, we're thinking question, like repeat the question, provide the summary, and then provide a table of sorts for each question. Now, the problem is, there's no singular format that we can easily use for each question. It just doesn't, the questions, responses don't lend themselves to it. So we can decide together tonight whether or not we want to try to do that. Maybe we can dig into it again later and see what we can come up with, or we could just go with the summary and append a refined version of this at the end of the report. And if people want to dig past what our summaries are, they can do that. And for time perspectives, or in the interest of time, that might be the best course. I mean, some of them, the ones that have numbers, like question number 6, that one's different. That one probably should have the numbers in a table with the summary. I don't recall off the top of my head which other ones have numbers like that.
Well, there's the one I said about, how often do you meet,
That one, yes, that one lends itself very easily
to a table.
to a table.
Let's see, I've got beautiful number 6. So 6 and 7 of mine work very well in a table.
13, you frequently, infrequently, are never coordinate your board activities with other town departments. That's
Oh,
a
that's-
very concrete
That's very,
responses,
yes,
right?
yes.
9 frequently, 8 infrequently, 3 never.
Right, so, I mean, whether or not we actually need to put that in a table or just put that right into the summary may not
No.
Well,
matter.
this is a good one to highlight, and then are we dividing those out by elected and appointed, because there was some
Right.
discussion of that too.
They're, right. That may also vary by a particular question, like there's a question, I think it was 22, that asked, you know, do you think that we need more appointed or more elected officials? And that might be a good nugget of information for the board of selectmen to consider when we respond to that one.
No, that's the inefficiency one. The other one is 24, the other one that I
24.
did. Yeah, 24 is, those are what advantages and disadvantages do you see from having elected boards. That one doesn't fit too well into it, because you're asking for
Well,
text.
so maybe this is a, I think what we need to do is get the summaries in a state where we can all talk about them one by one. And as we talk about them, we can decide for each one whether or not we should have a table. I think that makes sense to me, step by step, decide that. So,
If we had all of our summaries in some form, like you have this, and we can distribute it at the next meeting, okay? Instead of my scratches here. Then we could decide which ones we needed to go back and refine.
we can decide which formats we like, we can
Mhm,
decide
yeah.
how we want to frame the responses, all of that.
Yeah,
I don't know if we want to start that process tonight, so that when we go back to do summaries or other, some
I
of them.
would like to
will
start
have
tonight,
good
'cause, you know, I did something, I'd love to get your reaction to what
Okay,
I
good,
did.
good.
Just to say,
Yeah.
yes, that's too high level, or whatever.
yeah, okay, good.
Do you have enough to pick it up?
I do.
Look at that.
I even have one extra copy that these gentlemen will share. Dick has a question.
Sure.
Board of Selectmen meetings are scheduled for the 3rd and the 17th of June. Work session on the 13th, but the Mondays of the 3rd and the 17th are the 2 next scheduled regular Board of Selectmen meetings.
I will get Kelly that letter tomorrow, and then if it's too late for the board of selectmen meeting on the 3rd, then it can wait till the 17th probably,
Just so you know.
but, you know, part of it's gonna come down to what Kelly finds out the answers or what our sunset date is, so. All right, so questions,
Right, so I have all of the detail, of course, in a different spreadsheet, but that was just to help me figure out what the what the short answer was, right?
Right.
So,
So when you say you had the other detail, it was different than what was here in this
no,
gigantic?
it
was
was
just-
what was in
Was
there.
just the sections from there?
Correct,
yeah.
but then I tried to, but I did not organize it by elected versus appointed.
Appointed, yeah.
And so that, you're right, that might be an interesting way to look at it. Because when you see, you know, 9 frequently, 8 infrequently, it would be interesting if that skewed more toward appointed or not.
As I think about it, I think it would be much easier, and probably more beneficial to the board of selectmen if at the end of every summary we said, the general consensus of the elected officials for this question was X,
Yeah.
and then put in parentheses what they said, like
Mhm.
6 to 4, and then the general consensus among appointed officials was Y.
Yeah.
And then, that way we don't have to worry about tables, it's in plain English,
Yeah,
and I think that might resolve a lot of our issues, and they're still gonna have the data.
So you're saying no tables, unless it's all numbers?
Yes. That's what I'm
Okay,
thinking.
all right, so we'll go tables for,
But as far as format goes, I think it makes sense to add a sentence in at the end about appointed and elected and appointed officials.
so what I have is kind of the thing we're aiming toward, is a statement of the question, a high-level summary, a table for numbers, and then a sentence at the end clarifying elected and appointed.
I think that the summary doesn't have to be too high level. I think the high level summary is the executive summary at the beginning with our recommendations.
Which isn't question by question, is it? No, it's just
No, it's not,
on
it just says this is
overall.
what we found overall, this is what we recommend, this is what we suggest for further investigation, if that's what we're gonna do. But I think that the summaries don't have to be too high level, they can be a little bit meatier. We don't wanna get bogged down in, you know, regurgitating everything, but, you know, you could write a paragraph. It doesn't have to be like a sentence or two, you could write
Mhm.
like a paragraph of the general themes, and then at the end of that paragraph, add, the elected official said this, and
Okay,
appointed
so
official
then-
said that. And then if there's a way, when you're looking at your individual questions, to summarize it in table form, take a shot at it, suggest something, even if you just sketch it out and say, this is what I'm thinking for a table. You know, not sketch it out necessarily on the computer, if you prefer to sketch it out. You know, we can figure that all of it out. But my thought is, this type of report lends itself more to Microsoft Word than in Excel. Like,
Mhm.
it's not really a table,
Yeah,
it's more of a summary.
yeah.
what I'm not capturing in question 13 is, you know, if a board meets monthly, some people think that's frequently, and some people think that's infrequently.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
did not
I-
capture that, I just captured what they said.
I did the question that says, how often your board meets, and they ranged everything from twice a year to
Right.
25 times a year.
Well, all the more reason to put that into your words. If you
Yeah.
remember from your interviews contextually, what, you know, do you get responses, you know, when someone said frequently, was that once a month to them? Do you recall that in your interviews?
I don't, I'd have to,
I don't recall either, I'm not saying you should, we all asked all the same questions, so I have to go get my notes and look, and I have a feeling that probably wasn't, I don't recall asking a specific question, what do you think frequently means?
yeah, I don't think we have.
No.
I don't think we asked that, so.
No, I didn't ask it that way.
Although, yeah. Question 13 is really not about how often you meet, it's how often you coordinate
Coordinate,
your activities. And if, right, and.
If they only meet twice a year and they don't coordinate, then it's never, but if they meet
Right.
25 times a year and they coordinate 9, they're still probably saying infrequently.
Right, exactly.
So if we were to put this paragraph, if this question 13 into words, you could have 3 sentences, one for frequently, one for infrequently, one for never.
Correct.
And you get another sentence for the appointed board, broken down by
Yeah.
elected each for appointed boards. And then another sentence for context if you wanted to, like, you know, and maybe that sentence you take a shot at drafting that, and then that's the sentence that we talk about as a committee.
Mhm.
This is what we think these responses mean.
Yeah. All right, so I can do that. For question 14, that's a hard one because the responses to question 14, it's clear every committee feels that they're doing really well.
Yes.
You know, what's working well? Well, we work well, we respect each other, we have good communication, we listen to each other.
We're the best.
You know, we're good. And most of them, not everyone, most of them saying, oh yeah, town government's fine, everything's working great.
Yeah.
You know,
Most people were pretty happy with,
yeah,
That's been the
Yeah.
consensus, I think we've been saying that for a while, and I think it's perfectly appropriate to put that in.
yeah. So, I mean,
Words.
if I were to call out any exception, it seems like, and I don't even know that, even if there is one for question 14, but if there was, it would be giving it undue attention.
I think you still mention it, and say, although,
Making it up.
we'll have to refine it in a way so it doesn't outweigh the 19 of the 20 responses that were overwhelmingly positive about
Yeah.
town government.
Yeah.
But I think it still deserves mention.
And I don't think there was for this one, so we'll keep going. So for question 15, this was a very badly worded question. Very badly worded.
yes, too many
Because-
ifs or ors.
The question was, does the time spent support or hinder your main mission? And three people said supports, a couple of people said, oh, well, supports and hinders, but you had one person said yes, and 9 people say no. Now, what are they saying no to?
Right. And we talked about that a couple months ago, I think.
It's just a bad
It's
question.
a bad
It's
question.
a bad question. I'm not sure you can make any judgments, I think the takeaway is that's a bad question.
Do we, that may be, but do we recall what our discussion was a couple months ago? Was it just to ignore it, or was it just to, because,
I don't know, I don't think we ever said to ignore any questions.
No, we didn't, we didn't at the time. We just realized it was,
So I recall in my notes say, for the people that I interviewed, that no did not hinder. Because I think that was one of the ones that if someone said no, they were focusing just contextually on the people I interviewed, they were saying no, it did not hinder their efforts.
yeah, and my gut tells me that's what the majority of the
Yeah.
no's are, right? When somebody says no, I think they're saying no, there's not an issue. Right,
And if
it's
they-
not a hindrance.
Yeah, and if they say yes, they're saying support.
Right.
Because, well, actually, most of the answers come down here to either no or support. No, no, support, no, no, no. Support, support,
But
no,
but
no.
look at like,
No,
what
no.
what did like health or park and cemetery have, what did they have,
Where the hell, it says no.
I'm sorry, look at the wrong one here, look at, trust, trust, what are those?
Commissioner trust funds?
Yeah.
Well, they don't say yes or no.
Correct.
They've got a
So,
lot to say, though.
So I put them into both supports and hinders,
Yeah.
is how I put that one.
it says we have decent support from the town, so that connotes to me that we have good support, but it could be better.
And what else did we say?
Mhm.
I don't remember.
It says we have
Oh,
decent
oh.
support from the town, but sometimes people ask for
But
minutes.
sometimes
the
they
day
ask
after
for,
meeting.
right, so.
But that's, that is not, I guess,
Yeah.
that's a personnel issue, that's
Yeah.
not necessarily a governmental structural
Yeah.
issue.
So you put that as a support? Okay. So I put that as
Right, so, but
Yeah,
we
yes
have,
or
to we
no?
have to go through, I would say, do your best to try to summarize even bad questions the best that you can. And then we're gonna go and raise specific concerns when you do it, just like this, like you're doing right now. We can discuss as a committee and figure out how we wanna word the summary.
Mhm.
And cultural council, what did they,
Oh,
on
they
this
were-
one, number 15?
Yeah, they, for the most part, there's no hindering, but this particular year they had a problem because they weren't, their treasurer resigned, so then the chairman had to do the treasurer's job along with everything else, and there was some issues getting some checks processed, but to me, in general, she was saying, no, it's not an issue, it was just an issue this year.
So again, I put that in the,
Yes and
Both,
no.
both,
Maybe
yes,
that's
how
a,
it-
generally there's not an issue, but occasionally there's a sticky wicket that we have to attend to.
Yeah.
I
I think the word in general covers a lot of ground.
Well, actually, cultural council starts with generally, so.
Generally, yeah, not a problem.
So maybe that's, you know, some people say never a problem, some people say generally not a problem,
Yeah,
right,
some people say it's a big problem, or frequently a problem. Back to the word
or
frequently.
sometimes.
Right, I mean, we're gonna have all these qualifications. that-
yeah, and again, there's nothing jumping out there as a frequently a problem. 16, how are possible improvements brought to attention of your board? Okay, so here's where I created my own, you can just see how I thought about it, that
Mhm.
some of the answers, they seem to be either through town employees or committees, or through residential applications. Now, that's how I chose to summarize it.
Mhm.
I just thought it was a, having read them all, I was just, you know, it seemed as good a way to summarize it as,
Well, I think that's exactly what we have to do. We have to take all the answers and figure out how would you categorize them, put them
Yeah.
into big categories that are,
Right, it's exactly right, so for each question, the categories are gonna be slightly different,
yeah.
and we've had to figure out for the questions where been assigned, how to do that. Speaking of which, I will email Libby and ask her to forward whatever she gives to Debbie to us, so we're not to duplicate that work. But we're gonna all divvy up the questions that she was responsible for,
Mhm.
because chances are they're not gonna be in this format after this
Mhm.
discussion.
Mhm.
We pulled up those minutes, see which questions she had.
Oh, I have it right here. There's my minutes, right here.
I have it. So Libby had 8, 9, 10, she had 6 questions. So if we take 2 more each,
And a seventh one was added, or added
Right.
8, but she
So,
had 8, so.
I don't know off the top of my head which ones of these are good or bad, but if 8 and 9 make sense, maybe Roberta, if you could do
Yeah.
this thread.
Right after what I did.
Right. John, if you wanna do 11 and 12, because it's right before yours. And I'll just pick up 10, I'm sorry, no. Oh, 10 and 25. We got 10 and 25. I'm sorry, so so I think this is all a good start. I think I know personally I have my work cut out for me to really summarize these into words.
So,
Gives me a
yeah.
thought about how to word it. I mean, summarizing the questions is tabulating the numbers of votes, that's the easy part. It's like
Right.
putting into words accurately what we think it means, that's the tricky part.
Right.
Well, I think you've done a good job of like boiling it down.
Boiling down the numbers, but then what does it mean? That's the hard,
Sure.
Yeah,
And that's the part that we take a shot at.
Yeah,
We can just take it, you know, one question at a time. We don't have to do all the first set of questions next week, so you're toast by the end of the meeting, Roberta, you get the first third of it. But we can just take it question by question, decide what we think the question means, decide what we like and don't like about individual persons' proposed formats, and just go from there, and just work through it.
Well, it might make some sense to just go in order by the questions, but it might make some sense to like do 2 of mine and then do 2 of John's, and then do 2 of yours.
I was just thinking
That's right.
rotate.
That's
just
right.
Yeah,
one
so
each and
that,
then
so that we get
through
a
'em.
feel for everyone's approach, because maybe, you know,
Yeah, that
some
sounds
approaches
good.
work better than others.
That sounds good. So I don't know, are we ready? John, I think this is great.
But, yeah, one more thing, just look at the, look at the last one on my question 18. So here's where, you know, the overwhelming, you know, I guess the headline is, there's not a widespread concern about organizational inefficiencies,
Mhm.
and yet different departments, you know, have specific suggestions, but there's not a lot of, you know, there's not a lot of convergence on any one thing.
Well, assuming that 11, you know, the no response was the housing authority, not net 11, you could probably say just over a majority of the people have not encountered specific organizational inefficiencies with their within their operationals, within their department's operations. And then you could say, of the few who did respond or cite particular organizational inefficiencies, this is what they said,
Mhm.
and then you
Yeah.
put in, or they, just like you've done here,
Yeah,
what they said and how many said it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know how that's a 2-part question there.
Nobody really answered the second part, to my, at least that I didn't see it.
well,
If no one
if
really
you say no in the first place,
Right,
or no answer, you've got 14 people there that,
right.
and then if you have the 7 who had comments,
Right.
that gets you to your 21.
And maybe you could say, of the 7 that had comments for particular organizational inefficiencies, no one had any specific, no one cited any specific impact on their departments. You know, that, the silence, I think, deserves a comment as well.
Mhm.
So I know that I need to do critical thinking about, and maybe I'd ask for you to do the same, not just the summaries, but questions like that, or the even better examples, the one you asked about earlier, John, about the hindrance, the supporting hindrance. Like, if the question itself stinks, we need to talk about that. So when
Or we
you're,
make an inference, you know.
or making it, so when we're talking about the summaries, put it right into the summary, what you think about the question, and then whether or not that stays in the final report is, we should at least talk about it.
Yeah. Okay, that, you've given me some direction, so thank you.
Well, just think how much you boiled this down helps me,
Yeah,
because I wasn't boiling it down quite like that. And I think this is kind of what you were referring to when you'd say blah, 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 7.
That's what I was
Yeah.
referring to. You leaving?
Well, I am.
Do you have the key? Do you wanna
I can
me?
give you one.
Are we done, so the Board of Appeals is done,
ZBA's done.
all right,
So I'll get you a key. Sit. I have to go get it. Sorry to interrupt.
that's okay.
I'll be back.
Do you wanna talk about any of your summaries from your questions? I have some summaries, but
Well-
they're not in the level of detail that we need to really,
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
mine, some of mine are just very straightforward because I had numerical ones, like the first one is your board elected or appointed? Well, that was pretty straightforward, it's 10 and 10, right? And if appointed by whom, okay, and so there was, of the appointed ones, 6 were appointed by the Board of Selectmen. Of the 11 appointed boards, 10 were appointed by the Board of Selectmen and 1 was appointed by the Finance Committee. So there's not much more to say about that.
No, you mean appointed by the moderator.
Moderator, yeah, the Finance Committee was the board
I
that
don't
was
think we
appointed.
appoint anybody, so I think.
Yeah, so that one's pretty straightforward. Number 2, we don't do that because it's all text. What does your board do? We can't, I can't see how we summarize that. I think we refer them to the appendix for number
Yeah.
2.
There might be a more general way to tackle that. You know, boards and committees in town, they're very specific, other than the board of selectmen, which is the sort of chief executive officer who oversees everything. Every board has a very specific task as spelled out by statute in the bylaws. So something very general.
General, yeah. And then
See statute, whatever.
or see.
Come on in.
Okay,
You can do it right on the recording.
yeah, I know. So, you, excuse me for interrupting again. You don't need to do a code or anything because the cleaning guy will be here later.
I don't know the code anyway, so.
Oh, you just lock.
Okay,
Just do that. Do whatever you normally do.
all right, just lock.
Hectic. Just lock. Goodbye.
Good night.
Night.
Now, question number 3 was my question about which employees do you appoint? And do you appoint persons to any other boards or committees, and if so, which ones? And of the elected boards, 4 of them, I think, appoint employees. I'm not sure, because that was some of the ones I had questions about.
So wait, does this overlap with the other question? What was the other question that you asked me to find that information about?
It was this one,
What was this one?
yeah. Because some of them I was questioning, some like, if you, Parks and Cemeteries say they don't appoint anyone. The Board of Road Commissioners say they appoint the superintendents. So doesn't the Board of Parks and Cemetery Commissioners appoint the superintendents too?
Well, no, it
Superintendent
doesn't
too?
necessarily follow that way. Even though they're both independently elected boards.
I know that there's charters and stuff, so I was just questioning whether those answers were,
Well, I've emailed I have the town's bylaws here. I don't think it's in there.
Finish your home phone.
That's the other thing, I don't want to go too far into what our bylaws do. So this is Park and Cemetery Commissioners.
Yeah,
The board shall have the duties and authorities of the respective boards of Park and Cemetery
I'm
Commission.
looking at text messages.
Boards of decision tree members?
So I get the number from that.
That's all it says.
Okay.
So, I mean, so,
Oh, Christ, I got all these overseas, international numbers.
there are statutes for these committees. I don't recall the statute saying, if they're very general, just like that. I don't recall the statute saying anything about who you cannot appoint. That one, that's probably why they don't have appointing authority.
but something like the Board of Assessors does appoint the chief assessor.
But even then, I don't know where that is, because our general bylaws are not that detailed with regard to appointment powers.
But I think, isn't the assessors, the Board of Assessors, isn't that like a general law or something? I mean, I think
The
that's,
Board of Assessors, there's a set of general laws, but I don't recall off the top of my head whether or not that they shall appoint the chief assessor.
Mhm.
Maybe it's in there, but I have to go find the statute.
okay. And then there was like, the school committee said, they give the stamp of approval for hiring a school principal. What does that mean? And they hire and fire the superintendent and assistant superintendents.
Well, they probably choose the superintendent.
but it's also a point of the superintendent for the elementary schools is for all three towns, right? So they don't actually, they have a third of the appointing authority.
Right, but there's, so Tri-Town, I'm assuming Tri-Town would do that, I don't know the answer to this. I'm assuming Tri-Town would do that. Certainly the principal at say Proctor or Stewart would be just the our Topsfield Elementary School Committee.
And the superintendent, the tri-town superintendent doesn't do that?
It's possible that the superintendent would do that at the direction
So
of
I
the school
was
committee.
on a committee of the elementary school when we needed a new principal, and it wasn't the school committee, it was a separate committee that was assembled
For
just
screening,
for-
for screening candidates?
for screening candidates.
But you made a recommendation, you
And we
didn't
made-
appoint.
And we made correct, we made
Yeah.
a recommendation.
To the school committee.
To the superintendent,
So we recommended a candidate.
anti-candidate.
A single candidate. So,
So I'm not sure of the details, but my belief was that the school committee would make that type of major appointing decision, not the superintendent.
Well, I can certainly go by what people wrote and not question it based on my own understanding. I mean, one would hope that if you were chairman of the Topsfield School Committee, you knew whether you appointed someone or didn't appoint them.
So let me see, I'm just gonna try to find that. Right, so, okay, so maybe the superintendent does the hiring of the principals and not the school committee, and basically the school committee just hires and fires, just like what that says, maybe that's all it is.
They said they gave the stamp of approval to the school principal, but they hired and fired the superintendent and the,
yeah, so the
Assistant
super was on the committee with me. So that, it was very Creedon at the time.
So the super makes the choice and the school committee has veto power, essentially that's what that sounds like? What would happen if the school committee said no? Who has the ultimate power? Maybe,
well, they all said no.
well, the superintendent said yes and the school committee voted no. What does that mean? Because I don't know what that means
Yeah.
as
Yeah, I
far as
don't,
stamp of approval.
see, that's why I had a real hard time with this one. And I don't know whether, when you're interviewing someone, you take what they say and you write it down, okay? And
Then we go back and think about it.
then you go back and,
Yeah,
well, what
right.
does that mean?
But in the context of our committee, what, I'm trying to think why it matters. I mean, I'm sure there's a reason why we thought so, otherwise we wouldn't have had the question on there.
Well, I think it was kind of, if you're thinking going forward of changing something, you need to know what you're changing,
Yes.
okay? You're taking this away from someone and giving it to somebody
Right,
else,
that was-
recommending it.
I would think that this question, we might consider summarizing it, something along the lines of, 15 of the 20 committees or boards hire the main person in charge of the whole department, and then that person, oversees that department. And the people under that person is appointed by, school's a bad example, is appointed by, as a town employee through the town administrator and board of selectmen. I think that might be one way to do it. Because, taking the ones that I worked on, Board of Road Commissioners, Board of Water Commissioners, they each appointed the superintendent, highway department and water department.
And they clearly stated it.
And they clearly stated it, and I mean, maybe the follow-up to this, the problem with this question is, part C is, so who appoints the other people in your department? Is, we didn't ask that question, but maybe it's the town administrator, maybe that's, we can ask that question.
But anyone the town administrator
Appoints is subject to selectmen
appoints is
approval.
subject to selectmen approval, so I personally think that that's the selectmen that are doing the appointing. The town administrator is giving a recommendation.
Correct. We can still always have more people come in to talk to us. We can certainly, to the extent that we do our best to summarize these things and then follow up with the elementary